Every generation before ours knew things we've completely forgotten, not because they were smarter, just because the world didn't give them the option of not knowing. Skills that kept people alive through winters, droughts, and everything else got quietly retired the moment someone invented a more convenient alternative. Here are 25 forgotten survival skills I bet you don't know. Skill 25. Reading the sky for weather. Before radar and weather apps, people read the sky in a precise, functional way that let them make real decisions about whether to plant, travel, or get their animals inside. The rhyme, "Red sky at night, sailor's delight, red sky in the morning, sailor's warning," is referenced in the Bible in Matthew 16:2-3 and has genuine meteorological basis. Weather systems in the mid-latitudes generally move west to east. A red sky at night means dry, stable air to the west, good weather coming. A red sky in the morning means moisture-laden air is approaching from the west. High, wispy cirrus clouds thickening over 12 to 24 hours indicate an approaching warm front. Rain within a day or two. Cumulonimbus clouds building vertically in the afternoon mean thunderstorms within hours. A ring around the moon means ice crystals at high altitude. Precipitation likely within 24 hours. None of this requires equipment. It requires observation and memory, two things that cost nothing and are almost entirely absent from modern daily life. Skill 24. Starting fire without matches or a lighter. This is the one that sounds most like a Boy Scout activity until you actually try it, at which point it becomes clear why matches were such a dramatic invention. The bow drill method is the most reliable primitive friction fire technique and involves a hardwood spindle rotated rapidly against a softwood fireboard using a bow to maintain speed. The friction generates a coal, a tiny glowing ember, in the notch of the fireboard. That coal is transferred to a tinder bundle, which is blown into flame. The entire process requires the right wood species. Dry willow, cedar, basswood, and cottonwood are all effective combinations. Precise technique and patience. It can take beginners 30 minutes to an hour. Experienced practitioners do it in under 2 minutes. The hand drill, spindle rotated directly between the palms with downward pressure, is faster to set up and requires no equipment beyond the spindle and fireboard, but demands more technique. Indigenous peoples across North America, Africa, and Australia used variations of both methods for tens of thousands of years before European contact. The flint and steel method, striking a piece of high-carbon steel against sharp flint to produce sparks into a char cloth or tinder, was standard in Europe and colonial America. Char cloth is fabric that has been charred in a low-oxygen environment until it catches sparks readily but doesn't burn openly. Making char cloth is itself a skill most people have never encountered. Skill 23. Finding and purifying water in the wild. Humans can survive roughly 3 days without water under normal conditions and considerably less in heat or with physical exertion. Finding water is genuinely urgent in a survival situation. Morning dew collection was a standard technique in arid regions. A cloth dragged through grass at dawn, then wrung out, can produce meaningful amounts of water where no surface water is visible. A solar still, a hole in the ground covered with clear plastic sheeting weighted at the center, drives moisture from soil into a container at the bottom. Output is modest, typically under a liter per day, but in a genuine emergency that matters. Tying a clear bag around leafy branches in sunlight harvests plant transpiration from non-toxic plants. Purification is separate. The CDC recommends boiling water for at least 1 full minute. 3 minutes above 6,500 feet elevation due to lower boiling points. Filtering through cloth, sand, and charcoal layers removes sediment before boiling, improving water clarity and purification effectiveness. Skill 22. Building a debris hut. A debris hut is the most important shelter you can build from what a forest provides alone. A ridgepole, a long sturdy branch, is propped at one end on a Y-fork or stump, angling to the ground at the other. Branches are laid diagonally along both sides as ribs. Then leaves, pine needles, bark, and organic debris are piled over the frame, at minimum 2 to 3 feet deep. The interior is filled with dry leaves as bedding, the entrance plugged with more debris. The principle is identical to a sleeping bag. Trapped air insulates. A well-built debris hut maintains a temperature significantly above freezing, even when outdoor temperatures drop below it. No tools required, only the forest. Tom Brown Jr., a prominent wilderness survival instructor, noted that beginners consistently underestimate the required depth. Most beginners build the pile about half as deep as it needs to be. Skill 21. Navigating by the stars. Polaris, the North Star, sits almost directly above the Earth's geographic North Pole and appears stationary while all other stars rotate around it. Finding Polaris requires finding the Big Dipper, following the two outermost stars of its cup, Dubhe and Merak, in a straight line upward for about 5 times the distance between them, and landing on a moderately bright star. That's Polaris. The direction from your position to Polaris is true north. In the southern hemisphere, the Southern Cross, crux, serves an analogous function. The long axis of the cross points toward the south celestial pole. Since there's no bright star at the South Pole equivalent to Polaris, the method involves projecting the long axis 4.5 times its length to estimate south. Sailors navigated entire ocean crossings using these methods. Polynesian navigators crossed thousands of miles of open Pacific, finding specific islands, using stars, wave patterns, bird behavior, and ocean swell direction. They had no instruments. They had observation honed to the point where the ocean itself communicated position. During daylight, the sun rises roughly in the east and sets roughly in the west everywhere on Earth, with seasonal variation. A stick driven vertically into the ground casts a shadow. The tip of that shadow moves from west to east as the sun moves east to west, so the line between two shadow tip marks, recorded 15 minutes apart, runs approximately east-west. This is the shadow stick method, used for at least 3,000 years. Skill 20. Preserving food without refrigeration. The household refrigerator became widely available in American homes in the 1920s and 1930s. Before that, preservation was survival-level knowledge. Salt curing draws moisture from meat through osmosis, creating an environment hostile to bacterial growth. Dry-cured bacon and salt pork sustained European and American diets for centuries. Salt, meat, thyme. Smoking adds antimicrobial compounds from smoke, phenols, aldehydes, organic acids, to extend shelf life. Cold smoking below 90 degrees Fahrenheit is preservation. Hot smoking is primarily cooking. Fermentation lets naturally occurring lactobacillus bacteria produce lactic acid, lowering pH until pathogens can't survive. Sauerkraut, kimchi, and traditional pickles require only vegetables, salt, and a container. Root cellaring, keeping root vegetables in a cool, dark, humid space between 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 40 degrees Fahrenheit, extends food through winter without any technology at all. Skill 19. Reading animal signs and tracks. In pre-industrial America, reading tracks and animal sign was as fundamental as reading a map. Hunters spent years developing fluency with animal behavior that most people today couldn't approximate. Deer tracks are heart-shaped cloven hooves, wider at the toe. Fresh tracks have crisp edges. Older ones show erosion. Shortened stride means the animal has become alert. Displaced soil at the back of prints means it's running. Scat tells you species, diet, and recency. Fresh scat is moist and dark. Old scat lightens. What's inside, fur, berries, bone, tells you what the animal has been eating. Rubs and scrapes on trees indicate deer territory marking and breeding activity. Understanding seasonal behavior lets a hunter intercept an animal rather than follow it, a fundamentally more efficient approach. Skill 18. Setting and reading snares. Snaring is the most efficient hunting method in a genuine survival situation because it works continuously without requiring the hunter to be present. A properly set snare catches game while the survivor does other necessary tasks, gathering firewood, building shelter, purifying water. This time, efficiency is what makes snaring genuinely valuable rather than just interesting. The basic snare is a loop of wire or cord suspended in an animal's travel path at head height. The animal passes through, the loop tightens, and it cannot back out. The critical variables are placement on an established animal trail, at the right height for the target species, loop size, and adequate camouflage. Rabbit snares are set at approximately 4 inches in diameter, positioned 3 to 4 inches above the ground at the center of a rabbit run, a pathway worn smooth by repeated use. Identifying rabbit runs requires the track and sign knowledge from the previous skill. Snaring and tracking are compound skills that build on each other. In a genuine multi-day survival situation, wilderness survival courses typically teach setting a minimum of 10 to 12 snares to ensure a reasonable probability of catching anything in the first 24 hours. 1 or 2 snares in one location is not a food strategy, it's hope. 10 snares across multiple trails is a strategy. Skill 17. Making and using a sling. The sling, a strap with a pouch for a projectile, has been used across virtually every human culture since the Stone Age and can be made from leather, plant fiber, paracord, or strips of fabric. A projectile released from a sling can reach 60 to 90 miles per hour. In practiced hands, it's accurate to 50 yards and delivers enough force to stun or kill birds and small mammals. The Balearic Islanders of the Mediterranean were among the most feared slingers in the ancient world, regularly hired by Rome as auxiliary troops. For survival, the sling requires no manufactured components. Stones are universal ammunition, and a functional one can be made in minutes. The learning curve is steeper than expected. Consistent accuracy takes practice that most people have never put in. Skill 16. Field dressing and butchering game. Finding an animal is only half the equation. Knowing what to do with it afterward is the other half. And for most urban and suburban people today, this is where things get uncomfortable. Field dressing must happen quickly after the kill because decomposition begins fast, especially in warm weather. The abdominal cavity is opened carefully to avoid puncturing the digestive tract, which would contaminate the meat. A sharp knife and basic knowledge of organ placement are required. A deer yields backstraps, prized cuts along the spine, hindquarters broken into roasts and steaks, shoulders, neck meat, and secondary cuts. Bone marrow from long bones, considered a delicacy in traditional food cultures worldwide, is extracted by boiling or roasting. The 1945 edition of the American Rifleman carried field dressing instructions as standard content. This was universal knowledge among Americans outside major cities until recently. Today, most people have never seen it done. Skill 15. Making cordage from natural materials. Cordage underlies nearly every other survival skill. Shelter, snares, tool lashing, water collection. Without manufactured rope, you make your own. Dogbane, Apicinum cannabinum, stinging nettle, cattail leaves, and the inner bark of basswood and cedar are among the most productive cordage plants in North America. The process: harvest, ret, soak, or dry to loosen fibers, separate into bundles, and reverse twist 2 bundles together. Each bundle twists in one direction, while the 2 twist together in the opposite direction. The opposing tensions lock the cord and prevent unraveling. This is the same principle used in modern rope manufacturing, just without the machinery. Dogbane or nettle cord has tensile strength comparable to modern twine and lasts years if kept dry. Skill 14. Identifying edible plants. This skill has exactly one failure mode, and it can be fatal. Misidentification of edible plants is a documented cause of death in wilderness situations, and confidence without accuracy is significantly more dangerous than ignorance. With that caveat clearly stated, in much of North America, there are plants that are unambiguously identifiable and nutritionally significant that most people walk past every day without recognizing. Cattails, Typha species, are among the most productive wild food plants in the world and are found in nearly every wetland habitat in North America. The pollen is edible and nutritious in spring. The young shoots are edible raw. The green flower head is edible boiled. The rhizomes contain starch that can be processed into a flour substitute. Dandelion, Taraxacum officinale, the thing you pay landscapers to kill, is entirely edible. Leaves are edible raw or cooked. Roots can be roasted and ground as a coffee substitute, and the flowers are edible. It contains vitamins A, C, and K in significant quantities. The Universal Edibility Test, taught in military survival schools, is a structured process for testing an unknown plant for edibility when identification is uncertain. It involves applying the plant to the wrist and lips before ingesting, then consuming a small amount, waiting 8 hours for any reaction before consuming more. It is not a substitute for identification. Some plants cause contact or internal reactions regardless of test sequence, but it provides a structured, safer approach to evaluating unfamiliar plants. Skill 13. Making and using char cloth. Char cloth is natural fabric, cotton or linen, never synthetic, heated in a nearly oxygen-free environment until it carbonizes without burning. The result catches a spark and holds a glowing coal with remarkable reliability. That coal ignites a tinder bundle. Making it, squares of cotton go into a small metal tin with a hole punched in the lid, and Altoids tin works. The tin goes into a fire. Smoke exits through the hole. When smoke stops, the cloth is done. Remove, cool with the lid on to prevent oxygen from reaching the cloth. Char cloth is lightweight, compact, and far more reliable than natural tinder for catching sparks. Before waterproof matches, every frontiersman carried a tinderbox with flint, steel, and char cloth as their primary fire kit. Skill 12. Tracking the sun for direction and time. The analog wristwatch compass. Point the hour hand at the sun, the bisected angle between the hour hand and the 12 points south in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, point the 12 at the sun, bisect toward the hour hand to find north. At solar noon, when shadows are shortest, the sun is due south in the northern hemisphere, due north in the southern hemisphere. Workers who operated outdoors before clocks read solar time directly, an internalized skill that essentially no longer exists. These principles oriented buildings, planned agricultural rows, and guided travel for thousands of years before any manufactured navigation tool existed. They still work. Skill 11. Using a deadfall trap, where snares catch animals by the neck or leg as they move through a path. Deadfall traps catch them by weight. A heavy stone or log is suspended above a trigger mechanism and falls when the trigger is disturbed. Done correctly, the weight is sufficient to kill the animal instantly. The Paiute Deadfall, one of the most widely taught trap designs in survival instruction, uses a toggle and cord trigger mechanism to hold a heavy stone propped at an angle. Bait is placed under the stone on a thin stick connected to the toggle. When the animal disturbs the bait stick, the toggle releases and the stone falls. The mechanical advantage of the trigger system means a relatively light touch on the bait stick releases a weight many times heavier. The Figure 4 Deadfall uses 3 notched sticks arranged in a specific configuration to support the weight. It requires no cordage, only the 3 sticks, precisely cut, and was among the most widely used trap designs in pre-industrial North America and Europe. Trap placement is as important as trap design. Animals move predictably along established paths, near water sources, and at specific times of day. Understanding animal behavior determines whether the trap ever gets triggered. Skill 10. Reading water to find safe crossing points. Before bridges and marked crossings, crossing rivers required judgment. People drowned making bad crossings. People who read moving water correctly made it across. The safest ford is wide and shallow, where the river has spread across a gravel bed. Narrow, fast sections concentrate depth and current. River bends are dangerous. The current cuts into the outer bank, creating deeper channels and undercut banks. Wade at an angle downstream to reduce resistance. Use a stick on the upstream side as a third point of contact. Unbuckle a pack before crossing. A loaded pack can drag a person under if they fall. Bubble lines on the surface indicate the thalweg, the deepest, fastest part of the channel. Read it before you step in. Skill 9. Making natural insect repellent. Mosquito-borne diseases, malaria, dengue, West Nile, are among the most significant causes of human mortality in history. Ticks carry Lyme disease across most of the eastern United States and Europe. Insects are not a minor inconvenience in a genuine wilderness situation. DEET was synthesized in 1946 by the U.S. Army for jungle warfare. Before that, plant-based repellents, crushed yarrow, Echolea millefolium, applied to skin was used by multiple indigenous North American tribes and has documented repellent properties. Wild bergamots, Monarda fistulosa, leaves contain thymol, a compound with documented insecticidal properties. Smoke is the oldest and most universally effective deterrent. Smudge fires producing heavy smoke are found in virtually every traditional culture operating in insect-heavy environments. Sage, cedar, and sweetgrass were commonly burned for this purpose. Pine tar, produced by heating pine wood, was used topically against insects and ticks in 18th and 19th century America and remains commercially available. Skill 8. Rendering fat and making tallow. Animal fat rendered into tallow served as cooking oil, lamp fuel, tool lubricant, waterproofing agent, skin protectant, and candle base. In traditional homestead life, every bit of fat from a butchered animal was collected and processed. Nothing was wasted. Rendering involves chopping raw fat, heating it slowly with a small amount of water until it melts and water evaporates, then straining through cloth into containers. Beef sweet produces the firmest tallow for candles. Lard, rendered pork fat, is softer and used for cooking and skin protection. Bear fat was actively traded among indigenous peoples and European settlers for its quality. A single gallon of tallow could fuel a household's oil lamps for weeks. Before petroleum, this mattered. Skill 7. Building and using a sweat lodge for hygiene. Before running water, managing hygiene in cold weather was a genuine challenge. Sweat bathing solved it, and did so independently across Scandinavia, sauna, Russia, banya, indigenous North America, Central America, and elsewhere. The North American sweat lodge is a dome-shaped frame covered with hides or bark, with a central pit for heated stones. Stones are heated outside, brought in, and water poured over them creates steam. Sweating cleans the skin without soap or running water. Finnish settlers in North America typically built the sauna before anything else. It served as a bathhouse, delivery room, and medical facility. Temperatures inside a traditional sweat lodge or sauna reach 150 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, sufficient to kill certain surface pathogens and documented to improve circulation and respiratory function. Skill 6. Making natural soap. Soap requires 2 ingredients, fat and lye. Lye is produced by leaching water through hardwood ash. The process produces potassium hydroxide, which undergoes saponification with fat to create soap. The traditional method: collect hardwood ash in a bucket with a hole in the bottom, pour water through repeatedly, collect the lye solution below. A fresh egg floating at the surface indicates sufficient lye concentration. Heat the lye with rendered animal fat until thickened. The result is soft soap, usable immediately or cured into hard bars over several weeks. This was standard household knowledge in colonial America. Almanacs of the period included soap-making instructions as routine domestic guidance. Commercial soap manufacturing in the 19th century made it unnecessary, and it vanished from common knowledge within a generation. Skill 5. Making and using a stone tool. Flint knapping, producing sharp stone tools by controlled fracture, is documented in the archaeological record beginning approximately 3.3 million years ago, with the Lomaquian tools found in Kenya. For the vast majority of human existence, flaked stone was the primary cutting technology. Striking flint, obsidian, or chert with a harder hammerstone detaches flakes with edges sharp enough to shave. Obsidian blades are sharper than surgical steel in some measures and are still used in certain ophthalmic surgical procedures today. Pressure flaking, pressing antler or bone against a napped edge to remove precise thin flakes, allows refined shaping of points, knives, and scrapers. The practical ability to produce a cutting tool from a rock on the ground is one of the most foundational skills in human history. It is now practiced almost entirely by hobbyists. Skill 4. Signaling for rescue. Knowing how to be found is as important as knowing how to survive. Most people have no clear idea how to signal effectively. 3 of anything, 3 fires, 3 whistle blasts, 3 gunshots, is the universal distress signal recognized by search and rescue operations worldwide. Signal fires should produce black smoke, rubber or green vegetation, against a light sky, or white smoke, green grass or damp leaves, against dark forest. A signal fire on a ridge is visible from aircraft at far greater distances than one in a valley. A signal mirror can reflect sunlight to a target 10 miles away. Any reflective surface, a phone screen, a CD, a mylar blanket, works. Ground-to-air signals are standardized internationally. V means assistance needed, X means medical help, an arrow shows direction of travel. Make them at least 10 feet across using rocks, logs, or disturbed vegetation. Skill 3. Making a primitive bow. The bow and arrow has been in continuous use for at least 10,000 years and was the dominant hunting and warfare technology across much of the world before firearms. A self-bow, made from a single piece of wood, works best from Osage orange, yew, black locust, or ash. The back, facing the target, must follow a single growth ring of sapwood, which handles tension. The belly uses denser heartwood to handle compression. Violate these principles, and the bow breaks. Material is removed gradually while constantly testing limb bend, tiller, to ensure even flex. A properly made ash or yew self-bow reaches 50 to 80 pounds draw weight, sufficient for deer at 30 to 40 yards. String, arrows, and fletching are companion skills. The full system can be assembled from forest materials in several days by a skilled practitioner. Skill 2. Treating wounds without modern medicine. Before antibiotics, widely available only from the early 1940s onward, wound management determined who survived injuries and who didn't. Wound irrigation, flushing with clean water, is the single most effective infection preventive and remains the primary wilderness medicine recommendation today. Military surgeons understood this empirically long before Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch established germ theory in the 1860s and 1870s. Honey has documented antibacterial properties, low water activity, hydrogen peroxide content, low pH. It was used as a wound dressing in ancient Egypt. Medical-grade Manuka honey is used in wound care today. Plantain, Plantago major, the lawn weed, not the banana relative, contains allantoin, which promotes cell proliferation and wound healing, and is used in commercial skincare products. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium, was used as a styptic, bleeding control, by indigenous peoples and European herbalists. Its genus name references the legend that Achilles treated his soldiers' wounds with it. Crush fresh leaves and apply directly. Skill 1. Maintaining calm under pressure. This is the skill that determines whether every other skill on this list gets applied or gets forgotten. It is the hardest one and the most consistently overlooked. Survival psychologist John Leach has documented that approximately 10 to 15% of people respond adaptively in a genuine survival emergency, staying calm, thinking clearly, taking appropriate action. About 75% respond with significant freezing and impaired thinking. The remaining 10 to 15% respond destructively, with panic that endangers themselves and others. The physiological mechanism is well understood. Acute stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, releasing adrenaline and cortisol. Heart rate increases, peripheral vision narrows, and cognitive processing shifts from the prefrontal cortex, planning, judgment, problem solving, toward more automatic, lower-level responses. In a survival situation, this can look like the mind going blank at exactly the moment it needs to work. Training reduces this effect. Military and emergency service training is deliberately stressful because the goal is to make skilled behavior accessible despite the stress response, not to eliminate the response entirely. The practical implication, knowledge itself reduces panic. A person who knows what to do in a situation is significantly less likely to freeze than one who doesn't. The act of learning these 25 skills is itself a form of preparation. Most of these skills took generations to develop and were considered basic competency until very recently. A person alive in 1900 who couldn't start a fire, read weather, or dress game wasn't just inconvenienced, they were in trouble. We've traded that fluency for convenience. And in most situations, that trade has worked out well. But the skills don't disappear just because we stopped needing them daily. They're learnable. Most of them can be practiced in a backyard or a park on an afternoon. Understanding what people before you could do with their hands and their eyes changes how you see the world they lived in, and changes what you think is possible with the right knowledge and the willingness to try. If this is the kind of content that's worth your time, hit like and subscribe. There's more where this came from.